Hi YouTube, welcome back to Wtf Rc Cars. So, we've got this tiny little adjustable servo saver, and hopefully this is going to fix one of the problems that I've got with the Kraton EXB, but I've seen it on quite a few Arrma cars where the only option you've got to tighten up the slack in the sort of steering, and it doesn't matter how good a servo you fit, you basically got your servo arm solid and it takes very little force on the wheels, especially when you're going quick. You'll sort of see the wheels doing that, but the servo's not moving. And I think basically they just took the approach that because most of these come out with the really weak spectrum servos, they just put a really weak servo saver in them, and unfortunately on most of them it's non-adjustable, so the only option you've got is to try and put little clips or shims in it, but then it's a bit of a pain and there's no real way to adjust it properly. So we've got this tiny little one, and it's got a grub screw in the side, so once you've set it, it'll not move, and basically it just lets you infinitely adjust the tension on the spring, so we should get far less sort of bump steer. But let's get you in for a close-up look and see what we need to do to get this fitted. Right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to want to get rid of these covers, so I'll just disconnect my voltage monitor, and you've got the 4 screws down here on the covers, so we'll quickly get these off. So you don't need to take these screws all the way out, you can just back them out and then you'll get both them to come away. The first thing we're going to need to do is get these 2 front screws out. Then we've got the 2 screws on the front, and I always forget that I've got the electric driver. So I'm also going to just pop this screw out. And then we've got the 1 bolt that goes down into the brace. Right, the next thing we're going to need to just back off our pinch bolts. And just watch your, don't lose your little spacers. And then you can drop that out. Right, next thing we're going to want to do, we're going to need to get the steering assembly off. If we remove these 2 pins, fold the arms out way, you're going to want to remove 1 screw on the end of the servo arm, and you're going to need to get something to hold the nut in place on the back. So you've got a little nut on the back of this. So you got a little washer on top, little lock nut on the back, and then we can get that out of the way. Now let's see how much we need to strip down to get this off. So let's see if we can get this off. This should just make it easier to work on. Right, so once we've got this off, you do have one more washer that sits on the top of that one. And then we just need to separate the servo saver. So if you grab this in pliers, you should be able to unscrew it. It is really held together well, so it was screwed all the way in and it was still way too weak on this one. So if we pop them out, then you just need to screw the bottom off the new one. So we're going to pop that in. Right, so we've got the steering arm in place. And then if you look at the standard spring, it's a good bit shorter, about 2 or 3 mil shorter than the spring that comes with the adjustable one. So then we're going to need to pop that into place, and then easier said than done, but you've got to try and compress this and then screw it on. But it is it takes some force to get it in there, but it is doable, and that is a lot stronger. Still a little bit of give in it, but far tougher. And then I'm just going to tighten up the grub screw, because we don't want this vibrating loose. That's got it nice and tight. Then on mine, I've fitted the bearing kit, so I'm just going to pop these out the bottom of the original parts, and if you just go nice and careful, you can get them out. It's a good time to just wipe clean the bearings, and these just sit into the new servo saver. So just pop them in, make sure you get it lined up. So you're going to want the little washer on top of this part, then just move your steering completely out of the way. Make sure the bottom bearing doesn't drop off. You're going to sit that down. You want the small washer back on top. Make sure your bearings are still where they need to be for this side. And then just lower it into place. Make sure that washer don't run away. Then if you carefully line it up, you should have this top one with the little insert. And then you should be able to get that all lined up. And we just need to screw them back together. So as you're assembling this, just double check, make sure you've not got any popped out drive shafts. And if you own an Arrma RC, you'll have plenty of experience popping your drive shafts back in, because they kind of like coming out. So while we've got it stripped down to this point, we can get the little lock nut back on the end of the steering arm. So we got all that back in place. Then next thing we want to do is drop this top cover on. And then you want the screw in the back that holds the chassis brace. Then we want there's 2 screws that go down into the steering assembly. And I will go over quickly tightening these up by hand once I put them all back in. So we can get all them in place. Then you've got your brace bar that goes across the top. And then we have the 2 that go all the way down into the bulkhead. So now you should be able to drop your A-arms back into place, or your top arms. And these little spacers, you may find it easier to put them on after you've put the pin back through. So you can then tighten your little retaining grub screw at the end. And then you probably are going to find it easier to just pop these on rather than try and line it up and get them to go through it. They're not too bad to pop back into place. So then on to the opposite side. Want this hinge pin back through, little grub screw nipped up, and if you're wondering why I run these in the position I do, I run these to rear because it pushes your arm forward, tilts the hubs up and gives you a bit sharper steering. Because I find the steering on the Kraton is a bit vague, but I'm thinking it's probably more to do with this really weak servo saver than it is anything to do with the actual steering setup. Because the steering setup on the Kraton does seem quite good. The angles seem right. The steering geometry seems nice. So we've basically put his pins back in, put them in, 2 screws from there, 1 from the brace, 2 screws at front. Make sure your drive shafts aren't popped out, as they can do when you're taking everything off like that. And now we've just got the 4 little screws that hold the sort of mud guards on. And for any of the things that I'm not a big fan of on the Arrma, I do really like these little mud guards. They do keep a lot of crud off. especially if you're flying around on a field. So let's get his voltage sensor back on, and then we can just throw this back together. We have got a lot stronger servo saver now. Bearing in mind, if you put a stronger servo saver in it, you've got to have a servo that's strong enough to cope with it, else you're just going to destroy your servo should you land with wheels turned and bash them straight. But depends on how you drive it, depends where you drive it, and it depends what servo you've got. So let's wrap this one up. So there we have it, all fitted in there, and quite nice tight fit. No binding on the steering, and hopefully should take some slop out of the Kraton 6S EXB steering. The rest of the steering looks like it's built right. It looks nice and solid. We've got the Wtf hubs, so we've not got any play in there in the balls on the end. We've got a reasonable servo in there, so we just needed to be able to tighten that servo saver up a bit. This one just completely non-adjustable. You can put spacers under it, but then you're restricted to going in like 1mm jumps or whatever spacer you can get, and if you put plasticans under there, they can then break off. If you put it above the spring, then you've got sort of the spring pushing against it. It's not an ideal situation, but with the adjustable one in there, you should in theory be able to line the grub screw up with the side, so you can get a hex driver in and under that, adjust it and then tighten it back up nice and easy. But hopefully we should have a better driving Kraton. Thanks for watching Wtf Rc Cars. Don't forget to like and subscribe, share to friends and family, hit the notification bell, and I'll catch you guys again in the next one.